Recorded for audio, London Scold, The Difference Engine. Written by Walls Thornton. Narrated by Frederick Surrey. Chapter 1. The Sea's Claim. The Resolute had been at sea for 43 days. The days blurred into one another, ropes and salt, wind and waves, the endless groan of timbers. For Thomas Crowther, it was the sameness that wore him thin. The sea, a flat grey sheet, that folded but never changed. But Edward never stopped counting. 43, his younger brother said that morning, grinning as he clambered up beside him on the forecastle. His cheeks were raw from spray, hair whipping wild in the wind. Which means we're 43 days closer to home. Thomas gave a short laugh. Home? We're 43 days further from it, you fool. The farther we go east, the farther Mam and Mary are. Edward's smile faltered, but only for a moment. Then we're 43 days closer to being paid, and Mam will have meat for Sundays again. And Mary. He shook his head, softer now. Mary can have a ribbon for her hair. She's always wanted one, hasn't she? Thomas's throat tightened, though he kept his eyes on the horizon. Red, if I remember. She used to tie scraps of cloth and pretend. Edward chuckled, a boyish laugh that made him seem younger than his 16 years. She'll have real ribbon yet, you'll see. They fell quiet, the slap of waves filling the space between them. For a moment, Thomas could almost smell home again. Coal smoke in the lanes, bread baking, his mother humming as she kneaded. Edward broke the silence. Do you remember Dar's lighter? The way he let us hold the ropes on the Thames? Thomas glanced at him, surprised. Course I do. You near toppled in once. Edward laughed, eyes bright. And he grabbed my collar before I drowned. Said, a Crowther that can't stand steady on a deck isn't worth his boots. Thomas smiled despite himself. The memory was sharp, painful in its sweetness. Their father had been a lighterman, steady as stone on the river, until the cholera came. Edward's voice softened. Sometimes I think Mam misses him so much, she don't know how to miss us proper. Thomas didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night, in the dim glow of the hammocks, Edward whispered into the dark, Do you think she prays for us? Thomas, staring at the beams overhead, muttered, Every night. Edward nodded. Then we've no excuse. We'll just have to come back to her. By the following evening, the younger crew had gathered, in their corner of the berth, hammocks swaying like cocoons. The air was sour with sweat tobacco and damp rope. Thomas lay awake, listening as the older lads whispered. Crates down in the hold, hissed a lad known as Twigs, a wiry boy of 17, with a scar down his jaw. Not cotton, not grain, opium, worth more'n all of us together. Shut it, muttered another. Best not talk, but Twigs leaned in, eyes gleaming in the lantern's weak glow. Think of it, just a lump, tucked away. In port, you could buy a cottage, boots, ribbons, meat every Sunday. Never see the inside of a mill again. The boys shifted in their hammocks, restless with the picture. One spat into the sawdust, another gave a low whistle. Thomas felt his heart quicken. He's right, he said, louder than he meant to. Heads turned toward him. One lumped feed Mam for a year. Edward sat bolt upright. Don't, Thomas. His face was hard in the shadow. It's not ours. You know what they'd do if we were caught. Twigs smirked. You'd rather scrub decks till your fingers rot, be a good boy till you're 60 and never see a shilling stacked. He leaned toward Edward. What's the matter? Afraid? A few of the boys snickered. The word hung sharp as a blade. Edward's fists clenched, but he said nothing. His silence was answer enough. Thomas seized the moment, his voice quick, urgent. I saw one of the officers crumble it in his pipe. Sweet smoke. He looked gone, like nothing could touch him. He turned to Edward, eyes shining. Don't you wonder what it feels like? Just once. No one would know. Edward recoiled. Number, I don't wonder. And you shouldn't, either. The older boys jeered softly, one tossing a bit of rope that struck Edward's arm. Twigs gave Thomas a slow, approving nod. Thomas felt the heat in his chest. Part adrenaline, part pride at Twig's look. He clenched his teeth, imagining the lump in his hand, the smoke filling his lungs, the world easing. You'll see, he muttered into the dark. It could change everything. The ship's bell struck midnight. Hammocks swayed, boys muttered, then fell still. Twigs slipped from his berth like a shadow, jerked his chin at Thomas, and padded for the hatch. 2 others followed. Thomas shook Edward awake. Come on. Edward pulled away. I told you. No. Then stay, Thomas snapped. I'll do it myself. Edward cursed under his breath, swung down, and followed. In the hold, the air was thick with salt and tar. The lantern twigs carried, threw jagged light on the crates. He wedged a pry bar into one, grinning as the lid gave with a groan. The smell spilled out, earthy, sweet, sharp. Twigs whistled low. There it is, lads. Riches enough for kings. He reached in, held up a dark lump in his palm. Thomas's breath caught. He crumbled a piece into a little pipe he'd carved and set it to the lantern flame. Smoke scorched his throat, then filled him, heavy and warm. His eyes fluttered. A crooked smile spread. You don't know, he whispered. It's like the sea disappears. Edward lurched forward. Thomas, stop! But footsteps thundered above them. A shout, lanterns, officers stormed down. The boys scattered like rats. Twigs bolted first, his shadow vanishing up the hatch. The others vanished after him. Edward stumbled, caught in a hand like iron. Chains snapped shut on his wrists. Thomas froze, lungs still burning with the smoke, watching as his brother's eyes found his, wide, terrified, betrayed. What's this? Barked the boatswain, his truncheon in hand. A packet of opium lay at Edward's feet like a smoking gun. The boy froze. The others had vanished into the shadows. Thomas was now gone too. Swallowed by the dark. Edward was alone. They chained him below decks before dawn, wrists raw against iron cuffs bolted to a beam. The officers beat him until his lips split, until the deck beneath him was sticky with blood. They called him a thief, a dog, a whelp unworthy of mercy. Thomas watched, hidden in the rigging, sick with guilt, but powerless to intervene. That night, the sea turned. The sky sagged low with storm clouds, thunder grumbling across the horizon. The Resolute heaved and rolled, her canvas straining. The watch shouted warnings, but the officers laughed them off. This ship had made the Calcutta run a dozen times. She was invincible. Then, a scream from the forecastle, a grinding shock beneath the hull. The timbers shrieked as if in pain. The Resolute had struck something, a reef, a wreck, God knew what, and the ocean came roaring in. Panic tore through the decks. Men scrambled for pumps, for axes, for boats. The air filled with splinters and salt spray. The smell of tar gave way to the stench of seawater flooding the hold. Thomas fought through the chaos, desperate, wild-eyed. He found Edward below, water rising to his chest, chains clattering as he struggled. "Tom!" Edward gasped, his teeth chattering from the cold. "Don't leave me!" Thomas seized the chains, fingers bleeding as he tugged at the bolts. The cuffs would not budge. The beam groaned as water surged around them. "I'll get you out!" Thomas swore, his voice cracking. "Hold on, Eddie!" But the sea rose faster than his strength. Edward's eyes went wide, terror and betrayal mingling there. The last thing Thomas saw before the lanterns were swallowed by black water was his brother's face vanishing beneath the waves, mouth open in a silent scream. By dawn, the Resolute was gone. A handful of survivors clung to wreckage. Thomas among them, shivering, coughing salt, his brother's last cry still echoing in his skull. When the battered men staggered into London weeks later, the company's boardroom echoed with rage. Not for the boy, not for the crew, for the cargo. Opium worth a fortune, lost to the sea. The East India Company courtroom smelled of damp wool and pipe smoke. Rain beat steady against the tall windows, muting the rattle of carriages outside. The long oak table gleamed under the lamps, strewn with ledgers, maps, and glasses of brandy that no one lifted. At its head sat Sir Edmund Rawdon, his jowls flushed, his voice sharp as he addressed the directors. A model Indiaman ship loomed on a shelf behind him, its sails white and perfect, as though mocking the disaster at hand. "The Resolute," Rawdon growled, "is gone. 17 men drowned. Cargo worth £500,000. Opium, gentlemen." He slammed his palm on the ledger. £500,000. The room broke into mutters. Catastrophe. Unforgivable. The markets will howl. Captain Elias Brown, gaunt from weeks at sea, sat stiff among them, the only man present who had tasted the wreck itself. His scarred hands clenched the arms of his chair. "It was a storm," he said. "No ship could have bested it." A director sneered. "Storms we can excuse, but shareholders do not excuse losses. The government does not excuse failures, and the newspapers will make sure neither forget." Rawdon's gaze hardened. "The Admiralty is already asking how we mean to prevent a second Resolute. If we cannot answer, they'll give us no end of meddling oversight. We need to offer more than prayers to Neptune." Another director muttered, "New charts then?" "Better training. Hire navigators with steadier hands." "Hands tire," Brown said bitterly. "Eyes fail. I've seen men wreck a ship for trusting a chart printed wrong, and who's to blame? The man who sailed her, or the one who set the numbers down in ink?" That drew silence. The directors shifted, unwilling to dwell on the thought. It was Samuel Merton, the company's secretary, who cleared his throat. His ink-stained fingers worried the edge of a sheaf of papers. "There is perhaps another possibility." Rawdon's eyes narrowed. "Well?" "A man," Merton said, hesitant. "A mathematician, though some call him half mad. He has been labouring these many years on a machine, one made of brass and wheels. The thing is said to produce calculations without a clerk's hand. Perfect tables, free of error." The directors erupted in scoffs and laughter. "A toy. A charlatan's trick. Next, you'll tell me a clock can steer a ship." But Rawdon did not laugh. His gaze lingered on the model ship behind him, its sails glowing in the lamplight. Slowly, he asked, "And if such a thing could exist?" Merton swallowed. "If it does, sir, no more wrecks from faulty charts. No more bad press for miscopied figures. It would mean certainty, at least in the numbers." One of the older directors sniffed. "Machines do not pay dividends." "No," Rawdon said softly, still watching the ship. "But they might prevent us from bleeding them." He turned back to Merton. "What is this man's name?" "Charles Babbage, sir." The name fell like a stone in water. Rawdon drummed his thick fingers against the ledger, then gave a sharp nod. "Find him. Bring him to me, or bring me to him. If he is a fool, we will know soon enough. If he is not—" He leaned back, his lips curling into something not quite a smile. "Then perhaps the East India Company will own the future." The rain lashed harder against the windows. The directors shifted uneasily, each of them hearing not only the storm outside, but the roar of the markets, the whispers of Parliament, and the weight of empire pressing down. And somewhere in London, in a house full of gears and smoke, Charles Babbage bent over his desk, muttering to himself, unaware that his name had just been spoken in the highest halls of trade.